On Tuesdays and Wednesdays, locals flock to the Tucson reptile shop to pick up their fresh batch of crickets.
We get about 14,000 crickets a week. Granted, not all of those are sold. A lot of those are feeding our own animals also, but most of our crickets here are sold for food.
Animal food, that is.
Lizards, other bugs. We even feed them to our chickens some. I mean, practically anything can eat crickets.
Including humans.
In my trips down to Mexico and Oaxaca in particular, you go through the marketplace in Oaxaca and grasshoppers, chapulines, and that's one of the staples in the markets.
Sitting in downtown Kitchen and Cocktails, the restaurant of popular local chef Janos Wilder, we talk about insects, yes, as food.
In Mexico City, I've had escamoles and eggs, and also great, tortilla, refried beans, guacamole, ant eggs. It was wonderful.
You won't find an insect in this kitchen, but Janos says he and other foodies are well aware of them.
So this is a real topic of conversation that people are having.
Yeah, it is. It is. This is a real thing. If you talk about how do you feed huge numbers of people, then you talk about where does the protein come from. And in that conversation, that's where it's talked about. We know it's not sustainable to continue to raise large numbers of cattle and beef and even poultry. Takes up a lot of space, takes up a lot of resources. So you look for things that don't.
In fact, for this reason, most of the world eats insects on purpose.
Just one day on the way to work, I listened to this TED Talk about environmental impact of insects versus other staples to our food supply.
So, who of you ever ate insects? That's quite a lot. But still, you're not representing the overall population of the Earth. Because there's 80% out there that really eats insects.
That's right, most of the world eats insects.
And it's a game changer when it comes to water use versus protein output.
Pat Crowley's background is in water resources. His interest in insects stems from his concern about how much water goes to commercial agriculture.
So I got really into agricultural water use and trying to develop efficiencies and figure out a better system that we can leave our children with.
Green beans, mushrooms, potatoes, those may be mainstays on many Americans' plates, but Crowley believes he can convince people to add insects to their meal.
There's some 1,600 varieties eaten around the world, but crickets are one of the most popular eaten in Africa, South America, Asia. And so it was already common species, as well as there's already some infrastructure in place to raise crickets on a large scale here in the United States. It's a game changer when it comes to water use versus protein output. And so really the only barrier to it makes sense environmentally, economically, nutritionally, and the barrier was a psychological one. So I decided to start a company to kind of get over that barrier.
That company produces Chapul bars, protein bars made with crickets. Yes, 100% pure cricket powder.
So having them right there at the front counter alongside the other options, generally people are willing to give it a try.
Luke Bertelson is the general manager of Rocks and Ropes. He is one of a handful of retailers in Tucson to sell Chapul bars. He says so far the reception has been positive.
A lot of climbers kind of think of their climbing food more as fuel than anything else. So a lot of times they're comparing, what's in the Cliff bar versus what's in the Cricket bar, and a lot of people are saying, there's a lot of protein in these, and they're made locally, so they're sold right there.
Bertelson says it is not only customers chowing down on these bars, the staff is buying them too.
I'm assuming you've had them.
Oh yeah. I will usually send one of my daughters lunch sometimes as well, so she likes it too.
But cultural preference can be a major barrier. Interestingly, food tastes differ considerably around the world and throughout history. Indeed, one person's garbage may be another person's delicacy.
Actually, New York State Penitentiary in the 30s had to limit the amount of lobster that they fed inmates because it was inhumane to feed them anymore. Just cultural perceptions of food changed. But at the time, it was considered as junk food, and It was an insect of the ocean. Nobody wanted to eat it. And then, now today, of course, it's a delicacy.
And in some parts of the world, shrimp and crabs are still considered repugnant. Interestingly, the exoskeleton of a cricket contains chitin, the same chemical found in shellfish. Consequently, people with shellfish allergies are advised to avoid eating foods made with crickets. At this point, chapul bars, named for the Aztec word for cricket, are sold in 70 stores in 14 states. Bars are also sold in stores in 5 countries and by online retailers in another 14 countries.
This morning we mailed out bars to Romania, France, England, and Australia. So we're very small, but our reach is broad.
A little closer to home, people are eating insects.
I had experience eating insects, seeing them prepared.
Ken the Bug Guy, too, has snacked on his fair share of crickets during an annual insect show in L.A.
Have you tasted one?
I have. First batch was good. The second batch, I wasn't too sure about.
So is it about the flavoring and not the cricket?
Yeah, probably. It's more, you don't taste the cricket as much as the flavoring.
Would you consider putting something that's insect-based on a restaurant menu?
Not yet necessarily. No, I don't think we're not looking at doing that now. I've thought about it, but I think there's still a little too much stigma attached to it in a restaurant like this. But then again, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, we weren't putting marrow bones on our menu. We put marrow bones on the menu. We weren't working with lamb's tongue. We have lamb's tongue tacos on our menu. We weren't working with beef cheeks.
When it comes to protein bars, there are a lot of options out there. But chapul bars stand out from the crowd, not only because of their ingredient list, but because of the company's core message: thinking about ways to eat well while also eating sustainably.